Previously, we've talked about the conventional financing loan exhibit. Now we're going to talk about the FHA Loan Contingency exhibit. And that's what you see up here on your screen. We're going to go through the mechanics of filling out this form. So again, you're going to put up here what the exhibit is. This is exhibit B because maybe your seller's disclosure statement is exhibit A. So this would be exhibit B. Remember, exhibits are A, B, and C. Amendments are 1, 2, and 3. Keep that in mind. So again, you're going to put in here with the offer date of whatever today's date is that you're writing this or the offer is coming in at. So 31st of May, 2017. And you're going to put in the property 234 Main Street, and it's going to populate Roswell. And the zip code 30076. And you're going to fill that out. The first step you're going to do is come down here, and just like on the conventional finance exhibit, you're going to check one of these two boxes and you're going to put in the price of the loan. So in this case, they're getting a 95% loan because they're putting down 5%. So filling this out, you're going to have a discussion with your lender about the loan amount, terms, and the interest rate. This is the loan amount, not the amount of what they're putting down. So you would not ever see 5 in there. As an FHA, you would see something like 95. 95 means that they're putting down 5% of the loan as the down payment. So again, the more that a buyer is risking and putting in towards getting their loan, the happier a seller is. So if you had two offers and one was at 95% loan and one was at 80%, as a seller, they might want to take the 80% because it's more, the buyer has more risk involved in it. So just kind of keep that in mind. You're going to obviously talk about the terms and the interest rate and whether it's fixed, and FHA is always institutional. The nature of FHA loans. It could be adjustable or fixed. You check one of those two boxes. But again, you've had this conversation with your lender or the buyer's lender, depending on who they're using. You're going to put in here XYZ Mortgage Company, and fill in the information. Maybe put the lender's name and phone number there for all the parties to see. And again, just like the just like the conventional, you have the buyer to notify seller of intent to proceed. In this situation, we've got to make sure we send an addendum to the contract or an amendment to the contract stating that the buyer is using either XYZ Mortgage Company or another mortgage company. Remember that our HSL lending partners have their second opinion program, and they are able to provide a second opinion based on what somebody's getting from their previous lending company. So even though you have XYZ Mortgage Company here, you may be able to use HSL if you use their second opinion, and that's a better deal for your buyers. Then that is awesome. Keep that in mind. You would fill out number 4. You would do a amendment to the contract, and you would write about what you would write something in the amendment like all parties agree the buyer is now using ABC Mortgage Company or HSL Mortgage Company for their loan, and you would send that out and have all parties sign and acknowledge it. So what number 4 here says is basically when they have filled out the application and are moving forward, you need to provide that intent. And most agents are not doing that, and that puts the buyer's earnest money at risk. So we want to make sure that you understand that. Just like in the previous ones that we've talked about, you're going to have a financing contingency period, 25 days. You're going to come down a little bit further. You're going to have a couple of things here that are new, that are not on the other exhibits, and that is the amendatory clause. So this says that HUD and FHA require certain things. Go to an FHA class, talk to your lender about what those requirements are. But if, for example, there are not certain livable items in the house, like let's just say a hot water heater is not there, then in here you would put in an amount of money that the seller would be required by FHA to provide to get the house up to that livable standard as per FHA. Again, talk to your lender, talk to your broker about this, but that is an amount of money that the seller is legally obligated to pay. Now, you don't have to have them pay anything. It can always be 0-0, and all of those commitments would then fall to the buyer. So, generally I put about $500 in. Most agents generally top it at $500. If you have questions, again, go to your lender, talk to them about what to put in here. But generally I put $500. Seems to be a mean average. And very rarely is there anything the seller needs to do, but that is just an opportunity for the seller to pay some costs for your buyer to get the house up to FHA levels if it is not already there. The FHA upfront premium, you will need to talk to your lender about that. I believe it's 1.75%. Don't quote me on that. It may have changed, but you will put in what that number is that is there and have your buyer fill that out. And whether it would be paid in full at closing or added to the loan amount, you would check one of those two boxes. And then seller agrees to pay the following lender fees. These costs are or are not included in any closing costs. So in the purchase and sales agreement, you've included some closing costs. So these items in number 13 are typically included in those closing costs. Any repairs required in the FHA commitment shall be completed and paid for. So as we go down the sheet, you're going to find the amendatory clause. This tells us that the FHA has to appraise for a certain value. So if your offer is $317,000, then the house has to appraise for $317,000. So you would put the same number in here as you do in the as you do in the purchase and sales agreement. So the amendatory clause is similar to the appraisal contingency in the appraisal contingency exhibit. But this is the amount that the home has to appraise for. So if in your initial offer you go at $317,000, but it drives it up to $325,000, then you have to come back and do this at $325,000 and make sure that that is changed. So if you're doing the FHA, you want to make sure that that number is changed per the FHA amendatory clause. Then you're going to come down, you're going to do the FHA upfront percentage. I think it's 1.75, but check with your lender. And generally it's paid at full at closing. It can be added to a loan amount, and that is something that you would ask your buyer's lender about. Down here under 13, seller may pay for the following lender fees. Those are included. So you would check the first box that those fees, tax service fees, are included in the closing costs. Any repairs required in the FHA commitment shall be completed and paid for by, you would put in here seller, and those repairs are not to exceed, and you would provide an amount here, not to exceed $100, $1,000, $500, whatever that number is. If something in the commitment is, let's just say that there is the hot water heater at the property and it's not working, FHA won't provide the loan necessarily unless you have this commitment, and in this commitment the seller has agreed by signing the FHA exhibit to put that amount up to $1,000. So if the hot water heater costs $2,000, then buyer and seller split that cost. If it costs $750, then the seller is responsible for putting it up there. You don't want to put a number in too high that makes the seller not want to accept your offer. You don't want to put it in too low that it ends up costing your buyer money. So again, hopefully you have gone to an FHA class with our lending partners, HSL, and understand what's required in an FHA commitment. So you, as you're showing the homes, you're having that conversation and you're discussing it with the listing agent as well as you're putting in the offer. So figure that number out, but put in a number there. You're going to come on down to number 17. This talks about public sewer and public water. If it is already attached, then you don't need to do anything. If it is not, then you're going to check one of these boxes. Both buyer and seller agree that if public water or a public sewer system is available at the street, property must be connected. You would check here, buyer or seller. Seller agrees to pay the cost of said connection not to exceed blank amount. Let's just say, again, another $1,000. So in theory, at this point, if this was the contract, your seller would be subject to $2,000 in total fees, $1,000 for the FHA plus this. Or buyer to pay X and seller to pay X of the connection. So buyer and seller could split that cost, whatever that number is, if you did the second one. Up here, it could be buyer. You could say that the buyer, but I don't know why you would do that with an FHA. That's one of those things about FHA is if it is at the street but not connected, then that can be fairly expensive. So if you run in that situation, you might want to try to talk to the lender about getting your buyers approved for conventional, because that is not something that needs to happen as a conventional loan. And then 18, read 18, and 19, you need to check that this is an arm's length transaction or is not an arm's length transaction. If it is not, you need to give the reasons why. An arm's length transaction means that there is no collusion, no back alley deals, no anything like that. It's a straightforward deal. You're representing a buyer, and the seller is representing or the listing agent is representing a seller, and those two are do not have any relationships or anything that you know of. So generally, you would check that this is an arm's length transaction and there is no relationship between the buyer and the seller. Obviously, you're going to come down, have your buyer and or seller, depending on who you represent, check these boxes, fill out the information down below, and that is the FHA loan commitment overview. So hopefully if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the lender or the broker, but it is a very simple form to fill out, just a couple of areas that you need to make sure that you fill in.